Back in 1985, I traveled with a basketball team to the Philippines. And we traveled the country playing basketball, and at halftime we would present the gospel. And we did that for 5 weeks. Actually, I did that a couple of years. We do that 5 weeks on end. And much of our travel throughout the islands was by boat. And when we got on those boats, we had full confidence and trust that those boats were seaworthy. In my 10 to 12 weeks that I spent in the Philippines, those 2 years, we never had a problem. But the story was relayed to us by one of my teammates. His teammate's name was Roy. He'd been on a previous basketball team that had traveled the country, and they got on a boat and they're headed to an island, and they get close to the island and the engine cuts out. And everybody has to get off the boat. Now the boat was close enough, there was a large sandbar, so they were able to get out of the boat and start walking toward land. But they still had to walk quite a few hundred yards to land. What's interesting is this was at night. As they're getting out of the boat, the guide says, see that light? And that light was off in the distance. You see that light? That light is where you need to go. Follow that light and you'll be safe. Nothing will happen. Well, what the guide is not explaining is that in between sandbars is a trench. So Roy and the basketball team and the others who are on that boat are making their way to shore, and it starts to get deep. And we're talking deep, and really deep. And these guys are basketball players. Just about everybody's taller than me, right? That water's coming up, and pretty soon everybody starts talking about how deep it's getting. And there's a little bit of concern, are we going to make it? And so in the midst of all the confusion about this water getting deeper, finally, as they continue talking, they make their way, and sure enough, it starts to get a little more shallow, and the water starts to recede down, and they've got a little more, quote-unquote, breathing room. But as they look toward the shoreline now, they're a few more feet in, there are lights everywhere on that shore in this city. And now the confusion isn't the deep water. The confusion is, do we know where we're going? How do we know we're not going to be lost? And pretty soon there's a lot of chatter. And above the chatter, Roy shouts, "It's that light right there." And he points to the light. And the coach looks at Roy and says, "Well, how do you know that's the light?" He says, "I haven't taken my eyes off it." In the midst of all the splashing around and all the confusion, there was one guy who still had his eyes on the light. They get to shore. The coach asks Roy, yeah, that's pretty impressive. We all lost track of which light it was. And Roy says, "I can't swim. I can't swim." That kept his focus on that particular light. We live in a world of confusion, a world of distraction. And our distractions come from all sorts of different places. Some of the distractions are on our cell phones. I'm just kidding. I am just kidding. I'm messing with you. You know what's funny is as I'm working this sermon this week, I'm thinking there's going to be somebody on their phone. It's all good. You were checking out the table's Facebook page, right? Exactly. Making sure we're on. By the way, whether it's our cell phones, whether it's stuff going on in our lives, you know, the last conversation at work, you know, you're talking with colleagues and all of a sudden they drop a bit of information that you haven't heard before and it affects what you're doing and you're like, oh my. And now you're distracted from what you're supposed to be doing. There are all sorts of distractions. Sometimes distractions, those things are good things. Sometimes we are too focused on the wrong thing. I remember a few years ago, I was immersed in a book at an airport and missed my flight. Yeah. In fact, I was at the gate. I was so immersed in that book. I didn't see the line go by. I didn't see I didn't see everybody go through that door. And in fact, that almost happened to me last week. I'm so immersed in a book, and I fail to recognize that sign right next to me has changed from Harlingen to Corpus Christi. It got really quiet, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh my. This is like deja vu. Are we doing this again? And they're like, oh sir, your gate's changed. So while I'm reading my book, the gate had changed to another part of the airport. So I hot-footed it to the new gate, but I was focused. I was just focused on the wrong thing. We fight all day at times to maintain focus on whatever we're supposed to be doing. The passage we read this morning is all about focus. It's all about focus. 1 Peter is a letter that Peter, one of Jesus' best friends, writes to a bunch of Christians, a bunch of gatherings in what we now call Turkey. It was the early church. Well, you know Peter, right? You talk about focus. Peter is either distracted and constantly being distracted off of what Jesus is saying or what is happening, or he's focused on the wrong thing. I mean, we got the story. One of the big events in Jesus' life is that he gets to talk to Moses and Elijah at the top of a mountain, and no sooner does Peter and the others recognize that Jesus is talking with Moses and Elijah, Peter says, "Oh, hey, let's put up some tents. Let's stay here a while." You know, and Jesus is like, no. Peter's focused, but he's not focused on what he needs to be focused on. Peter is writing to these Christians, and this is years later. Peter is writing to these Christians, and they are suffering terribly. They are living in a culture that increasingly is hostile to Jesus. The book of 1 Peter is all about how do you live in a hostile environment. What do you lean on in those times? And so Peter handles the passage we just read, the passage Daniel just read. It's all about focus. What are you going to focus on when life comes calling, when life starts to seem overwhelmed? When there are serious distractions, how do you stay focused? The answer is found here in 1 Peter 1. Before we even get to the passage that Daniel has just read to us, Peter begins his letter reminding these people, the ones who are suffering, and in many instances suffering unjustly, he reminds them of their identity. Who they are. He starts off, the very first thing he says is, because of God's great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. God has given us new birth. New birth. We're not children of God. This new birth is given to us in our baptism as we place our faith and entrust ourselves to Jesus. We're given new birth. It's not anything that we have done. It's not of our doing. This is all Jesus doing. It's all Jesus. He's given us new birth through his resurrection, no less. And after reminding them of whose they are and the hope that they have been given in that new birth, Peter says this: set your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. For the second time in this letter now, almost in very short order, he's bringing up this idea of hope. Hope. He says set or fix your hope completely. Be laser focused in your hope. A laser is a light that has a single beam. And we're pretty used to lasers these days. From everything from garage doors to alarms and all sorts of contraptions. We know what a laser is, but to be laser focused is to not be distracted by anything else, but to have a singular attention, to have a singular focus. And so Peter writes these people who are suffering, and suffering unjustly, he says, set your hope, fix your hope, be laser focused in your hope on the grace that will be given to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. You know what Peter does? He doesn't have them set their laser focus on anything going on in the present. The present is so unstable, and it's unstable for them. They don't know what's going to happen the next day. We don't know what's going to happen the next day. What's going to happen the next day? A lot of times it's dark. It's the dark tomorrow. And for them, a lot of times there's no getting out of that kind of suffering. And for the stuff we're going through, a lot of times there's no getting out. Tomorrow's dark. And so where is your focus going to be? Where are your eyes going to go? Peter doesn't set it in the present. Peter sets it on the future. He says, set that hope, that laser-focused hope on the grace that will be given you at the revelation of Jesus when Jesus appears again. It's in the future. Set your hope on that grace. What's fascinating about putting grace in the future and putting your focus on the grace here is he's talking to people who have already been graced, and he's already said it. You've been given grace. You've been given the new birth. So the grace that is in the present, the grace that we experience in the present, is actually coming to us through hope from the future. It's a future grace, a future hope. And that is the object of their laser-focused hope. You see, we have been given grace in our salvation. Jesus gives us grace every day, just for the next breath. Grace, by the way, we talk about grace all the time here, and I hope we do. I hope we never stop. Grace is being given something that you do not deserve. I don't deserve the next breath. I don't deserve any of this. I don't deserve this gathering this morning. We're given a lot of grace. The new birth, salvation, life, forgiveness, it's all been given to us, and we didn't do anything for it. We didn't earn it. Jesus gave it to us unconditionally. But if that grace were all there is, then we really have no hope. See, there's grace down the line. There's grace in the future. When we talk about grace being in the future, we are reminding ourselves that what we see here in the present, even as we receive this grace in the midst of this messed up world, this isn't all there is. There's something else coming. Something a whole lot better. This grace is in the future. And what's interesting about this grace being in the future, it's grounded in an event in the past. Because he then points out that this hope, this laser-focused hope on the grace that's in the future, is all there, all comes about because of a lamb that is unblemished and faultless. He's talking about the Passover lamb, what they call the Paschal lamb. That's the lamb that was sacrificed in the Old Testament as Israel is getting ready to leave Egypt. They are getting ready to be free. God says, I'm going to free you from your captors. And so they kill a lamb. And they put the blood on the doorposts. And the angel of the Lord, God himself, is going to walk through that town, that city. And if he sees the blood on the doorpost of that house, the firstborn in those homes are going to live. If he doesn't, they die. The life of the lamb, the blood of the lamb is exchanged for the life of the firstborn. And Israel is freed, Israel is rescued through the sacrifice of that lamb. And so Peter brings it up. This grace, where you're going to fix your eyes and you fix your hope, it's all guaranteed. See, that's the difference between the hope that we're talking about here. It's very, very easy for us to look at the word hope in our New Testaments. It's very easy for us to channel what we think to be true about the word hope. You know, I hope the Bengals win the Super Bowl. You know what I really hope? I hope the Reds would actually win a game. That's how bad it is right now in Cincinnati. But that kind of hope, there are no guarantees, and there certainly are no guarantees that the Reds are going to win this afternoon. And not that kind of hope. This hope is guaranteed. This hope is actually set on something that has been fixed. That Passover lamb that died on a cross and rose again. Real events in real time, in real space, that make a difference for each one of us. It's that kind of hope. Our hope is set in the future because of something that has happened in the past. Christ's death, his sacrificial death for sinners like you and like me. So if that's where our eyes are to go, and that's where our hope is to go, what are we to do in the meantime? We just twiddle our thumbs. We're going to spend the next 6 weeks talking about what we do in the meantime. Made for more. Peter has that answer here. We're not going to go over everything that he says, or everything he has, all the instruction he has for people to do, for those churches and for those Christians who are suffering to do in the present. I want to focus on just a couple of them. But the very first thing he says, as you set your hope on the grace that's given to you, he reaches back again to the Old Testament, again to Israel. He says, be holy. Be holy. This is a commandment that was given to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. Be holy because I am holy. So he says, he brings it in. He says, as obedient children. By the way, that's that new birth now he's talking about again. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the desires of your former ignorance, but as the one who called you is holy, you are to be holy in all your conduct. As the one who called you is holy, be holy in all your conduct. Being holy, or the word holy, means something that is other, something that has been set apart. So our conduct is to match the new birth that we've been given. And what is it about this conduct? You know, and the moment we start talking about, well, what does it mean to be holy? What does that look like? That's the moment a lot of conversations go off the rails. You know what the New Testament talks about in terms of the general overall picture of what our conduct is supposed to be? That's one word. Love. Love. You want to have your conduct match the new birth that you've been given? Well, you act as though you've been set apart. What's interesting is we've already been set apart. These instructions don't come just straight down out of the sky. No, they are based on reality. The reality is that in Christ's death and in his resurrection, we've already been made holy. We've already been set apart. That comes to us in our baptism. But now, because of all that, we are to live as though we are, because that is who we are. So be holy. Act like you're set apart, because you have been set apart. And how do you do that? How is it that we are set apart from the rest of this society and the rest of this culture? And I can tell you right away, I can go to Facebook and I can go to Twitter, and I can immediately tell you how we're going to distinguish ourselves as those who have the new birth. It's love. It's forgiveness. It's integrity. It's not popping off without knowing the facts. I could start making the list going on and on and on. Always giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. Always treating the other person in the same manner as you would want to be treated. But that's what the Bible talks about. That's what it means to be holy. So as we wait for that grace that is coming, we're to live our lives unlike everybody else. We're to live our lives. You see, he uses the word perishable and imperishable. Everything we see, it's all going away. And nothing wrong with material possessions, but they're material. They're temporal. It's all fading away. This world and its systems are all fading away. None of it is going to last. Including, I'm looking out for number one. That as a worldview, that as a philosophy, always looking out for yourself first, that's fading away. That is perishable. You know what's imperishable? The gospel of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ himself. In fact, he says what's imperishable here is the blood of that Passover lamb. The gospel. So we're going to be different. We're going to be different. We're going to talk about grace. We're going to talk about gospel. In a dog-eat-dog world, in a world in which these people, these Christians are suffering unjustly, we're going to talk about stuff that seems stupid and foolish. Things like forgiveness. Things like grace. Things like thinking the best of the other person anyway. Anyway. Be holy because I am holy. And oh, by the way, he actually says this as he quotes the Old Testament. He quotes it this way. He says, be holy because your Father is holy. He says, because it is written, you will be holy because I am holy. Wow, that's taking this thing beyond instructions. Now it's promise. He's made us holy in our new birth. He is going to continue to make us holy. You will be holy. He guarantees it. You're going to be holy in the end. And in the meantime, we live our lives as if we are holy. And that sets the tone for living as people who are on a journey to see Jesus. He says, conduct yourselves in reverence during your time living as strangers. Living as strangers. You see, we are strangers. They were strangers in their world. We are strangers in our world. Not simply because that we go at things a little differently. Not simply because we come offering grace and forgiveness. We are strangers in this world because our new birth is from someplace else. Our makeup, our DNA, it has heaven in it. It has the resurrection in it. We are, Paul says, Peter's friend, Paul says, you're citizens of heaven. So yeah, we're citizens of this world. But what identifies as our identity is not of this world. We're strangers. Why? Again, we understand, as strangers, in living with the future in mind, we understand this isn't all there is. This is all going away. The only thing that's going to last are people in Jesus. All of this is temporary. All of us is fleeting. All of this is fleeting. We have to remind ourselves this because in the midst of a week, a difficult week, in which chaos ensues, in which the world seems like it's falling apart and everything is coming down, we have to remind ourselves that this is all temporary. And that our identity is not found in the things of this world. We are not of this world. And one of those old words that's used here is the word aliens. You know, there's a lot of talk about aliens. And when the Bible writers use that word, they're not talking about, hey, that's my phone, distraction. When the Bible writers use that word alien, they're not talking about some green guy up that's from some other planet somewhere, right? What they're talking about is the fact that this is all temporary, and we live as strangers, as aliens, as people who are on a journey. And that happens because we've been given a new birth. We've been given a new identity in Jesus. So that the things that frustrate us right now, and man, can I get frustrated, the things that distract right now, it's all going away. Now, many of those things are important things now, I get that, and we deal with them. And we're given wisdom and all sorts of comfort and guidance and grace to deal with them in the midst of mess. But ultimately, we always have to come back to the fact that all of this is temporary. It's fleeting and it's going away. And so Peter says, fix your gaze, fix your hope on the grace that is yet to come. You know, before Noel was born, Emily and I went to the Lamaze classes. How many of you have been to one of those birthing classes put on by the... Nobody? Okay, come on. I was... See? I was good. I thought... I get husband of the year for that, right? Right, sweetie? Yeah.
Man, you sure do.
So... Oh my word, Karen. Wow, boy.
He does. This one had never done it.
Okay, time to switch the sermon subject matter here. Anyway, went to the Lamaze class, and part of this method of helping the mother to be very calm, and you're laughing because you know Emily all too well. So part of Lamaze is you pick something that's familiar, some sort of focal point. And for us, it was a stuffed lamb, little stuffed lamb. And so as we practiced Lamaze, we went to these birthing classes. That lamb kind of became the big deal. This is what you're going to focus on that day. We're going to help keep Emily calm. You focus on this. That day came. I whip out the lamb, and Emily's not having any of that. That lamb did not last more than a minute. But you know what she wanted? She made it. She was pretty emphatic that she didn't want that lamb. That lamb is not working here. You know what it was? She wanted my presence. She wanted my voice. She wanted my presence. She wanted my touch. She needed a lamb. But her focus, helping her keep her focus on what is going on, was the person. That's what Jesus does for us. When Peter says, set your hope, get your laser-focused hope on that grace, it comes with a person. It comes with Jesus. And Peter says it twice in this passage, to set your hope. He says, you are believing in God already. You're believing in God already. He's given He raised His Son from the dead so that you would have faith and hope in God. At the end of the day, this laser-focused hope is on Jesus Himself. He's the grace. So when the world is crashing, when the world's falling apart, when stuff is going on, when we're distracted, we come back here and we remind ourselves once again that our hope is in Jesus. Our hope is in Jesus to save us even in the midst of this moment. I spent this past week trying to save myself again. And I failed miserably. I can't save myself. I can't save those relationships. I can't save those things that I want to grasp onto. The only person who can save me in that moment is Jesus. Set your hope, your laser-focused hope, on the grace that will be brought to you. Those are the words. Brought to you. Well, who's being brought to us in the revelation of Jesus? It's Jesus Himself. Focus on Jesus. Put your laser-focused hope on the Lamb who is unblemished and without fault. Let's pray.